Hello, welcome to the How to Score series. And today we are looking at source-based questions as well as how to sort of unpack testing assertion questions for history. Okay, so what is testing assertion? Testing assertion is really an analysis as well as an evaluation of all sources. You'll be given a statement, which is an assertion that you need to prove based on the sources that's given in the case study. And if you are given 5 to 6 sources, most likely that half of it will support the statement or the assertion, whereas the other half will not. So how does testing assertion looks like in the national exam? And this is the 2018 history paper, the O-level paper. And as you can see, testing assertion is usually 8 marks. Okay, and testing assertion, there'll be a statement like what was mentioned, and you are supposed to find sources that support this particular statement or assertion that the Reichstag fire was planned by the Nazi. Okay, so how far do the sources support this view? Will there be sources that do not support this view? So moving on, what is the marking scheme for testing assertion type of questions? So here is a sample of a question, of an 8 marks question. Study all sources, if you can. And the statement is, life for youths under Hitler was beneficial. How far do the sources agree with the statement? So it's 8 marks. All right, and you can see that all these L1, L2, L3 are actually the levels or LOMS marking. And these are what we call descriptors. Whereas on the right hand column here, the extreme right, is actually all the marks that is being allocated. So if you see level 2, for example, all right, if you find sources that agree or disagree with that particular statement here or assertion here, all right, you're able to get 2 to 4 marks. Award 2 marks for one yes, and if you were to give another source that supports the yes, is actually an additional mark, and the limit or the maximum marks that you can give is actually 4 marks. What we want to score is of course level 3, and you can see that the level 3 ranges from 5 to 7 marks, and a maximum of 7 marks definitely, and you need to give both aspects of level 2, which means you need to give the examiner one yes, one no, which you will get minimally 5 marks, and if you use more than 2 sources, okay, it's an additional 1 mark, and if you use 2 yes and 2 no sources, it is as good as getting 7 out of 8 marks, but you must minimally use 4 sources. Now, of course, you have the bonus component, and the bonus component is a +1 +1, all right? And it is really dependent on how we write bonus, how we identify bonus. Now, this is an 8 marks question out of a 30 mark source based. You are recommended to spend at least between 15 to 20 minutes for this kind of question. All right, let's begin by unpacking how we write our answers for testing assertion questions, and we are focusing on level 3, which is the one yes, one no. Okay, so first things first, of course, you have to answer the question. You infer why source A would agree with that particular statement. You give source details, that means you quote. If it is a picture or a graph or a cartoon, then definitely you need to describe. Okay, and lastly, of course, it is to sort of summarize and explain what the source details mean in relation to, of course, this particular question. That life for youths under Hitler was beneficial. So if it's one paragraph like this, well written, then definitely you'll be getting 2 marks. Okay, so to get the 5 marks, you have to write another paragraph that actually says about disagree. That means you need to find another source that unfortunately disagree with this particular statement. Infer, again quote, and of course you explain. All right, so having 2 of these paragraphs would actually get you 5 marks. Now, how would you, for example, write your bonus? Okay, and when we look at bonus, it is about contextual knowledge, using of contextual knowledge to question a source. Now, take note, if you're doing bonus, you will need to use a source that you have already used. Okay, so that means just now we use source A and source B. You can either use source A or source B. Now look at cartoons, pictures that are extreme to QR, which is question the reliability of the source. Now when we QR, we look at the agenda or the motive of the source. Can you trust the source? Why? Why not? So how do we question reliability? All right, so this is just a sample. So if let's say, for example, you're given a picture and it actually is published in a German newspaper and it shows Hitler visiting a Nazi youth camp. So some questions that you can ask: how reliable do you think this picture is? Now, the fact that it is published in a German newspaper, what was the motive of the newspaper? Is it to make, for example, Hitler look good? Is it to show a certain aspect of Hitler? Is it to show the life of youths under Hitler? And you look at the faces of these young children. Now, what do you know about the control of newspapers at that time? All right. And lastly, if you think that this source is reliable or unreliable, do you think that it is an actual portrayal of lives for youths under Hitler, and was it really beneficial? All right, so think very carefully, explore the purpose of this source, the very fact that it's a German newspaper. There were certain things that um, was important. Okay, look out for the nuances. Okay, so this is another practice, okay, on how we can actually question um, the reliability of sources. Okay, we're sticking with the same question. All right, life for youth under Hitler was beneficial. And if you read very carefully this autobiography, which is like a personal recount from a Nazi youth member, you can read and you can see that, there is something interesting about his experience, especially the second half of this paragraph. It seemed to be there was a great revelation or a great discovery about how Hitler youths were initially taught and what they were actually doing. Okay, so questions that you need to ask. For example, how reliable is this autobiography? And since it is a description from a former Nazi youth member, would this be more reliable? Can I trust this more? Why? And what do you expect a Nazi youth member to be? What do you think is the motive or agenda of this source? And lastly, do you think that somewhere here, do you think that the Nazi youths are actually doing all this? All right, based on your contextual knowledge, how do you know how reliable this is? All right, so now we've got some practiced. Okay, let's refer to the 2021 end of the year USS paper. We are doing question E, and if you look at question E, it says, study all sources. Hitler's rule benefited the Germans in Nazi Germany. How far do the sources support this view? Okay, some of you have been asking whether or not background information is important. Definitely, background information is important. It gives you a foreground, it gives you sort of a summary, it gives you an understanding of the source-based question itself. So it's important for us to annotate, because from the background information, we are able to see what the source is about, all right? It's about policies that Hitler introduced, and some of the policies affected the people in varying degrees. So at the end of the day, we know that the sources that we're going to read will have both sides. Hitler's rule was good. Hitler's rule was also, unfortunately, not good. So I'm going to choose source A, all right? So I've put the question, E question, the testing assertion question right on top here to sort of remind us when we look at the sources, we are looking at this particular question, all right? So Hitler's rule benefited the Germans. It is a poster, and obviously one of the most important thing that you need to remember is this. Okay, there's reasons why these two names are there, and they are of course Hitler's very close ally, very close friends. But at the same time, I want you guys to look at the provenance. This is about Night of the Long Knife. So based on your contextual knowledge, if you had remembered, the Night of the Long Knives was a way that Hitler got rid of all his potential enemies, and it was a clear massacre, right? Getting rid of course some of the key political figures that could in the future get rid of Hitler himself. And what is interesting at the end here, this part here, it says that only death can drive us apart. And truly, okay, he did remove his potential enemies. Okay, so going back to the question, how would you answer this? So obviously source A does not support the view because lives were lost and Nazi Germany was ruled with fear. So I'm answering the question, I am inferring the source. Because it is a cartoon, I am describing it, okay, with a bit more details. And lastly, I'm explaining it. Suggests that Hitler used his power to eliminate his opponents so that Germans lived in fear and Germans did not benefit under Hitler's rule. So, I mean, if he can get rid of his opponents, which were previously his friends, what more normal Germans? All right, so the next source is source B. Okay, so again, the question that we're looking at is Hitler's rule benefited the Germans in Nazi Germany? And if you look, this is definitely a Nazi poster. Focus on the text below. All right, it tells you about industrial production, which has risen, and definitely it is the result of the Führer, which is Hitler's economic policy. And you can see it does show positive aspect. So how would you write it? Supports the view, right? Because why? Answer the question, infer the source. It supports the view because the economy improved. And definitely quote from it. From here, this is where you quote your source details. And this suggests that Hitler's rule did benefit the Germans because once you have the economic policy, such as industrial production and factories, Hitler provided jobs and it solved the post-war economic problems. All right, for the last source, again, the question is the same. Did Hitler's rule benefit the Germans? And this is an interesting interview conducted with a German woman on her friendship with a Nazi youth. I just wanted you to take note that not necessarily all Germans were Nazis. Some Germans were Jews, some Germans were probably not supportive of the Nazi regime. Okay, and if you read this source, okay, um, she was talking from a point of view of her friend who had joined the Nazi youth, and you could see that there was intimidation. Okay, and years after that, she admitted that the Gestapo, which was the secret police for the Germans, had enlisted her to spy on my family. And then at the end of it, it's about betrayal. So the relationship had failed. That means imagine your good friend is telling tales on you, or is actually showing that she is spying on you, turning her back on you. So how would you feel? And how does this situation benefited the Germans? Did it benefit the Germans or not? Okay, so how would you answer this? All right, you can see that obviously source E does not support the view because the Germans were being brainwashed or highly influenced by Nazi ideology. All right, so you answer the question, infer the source details, and then followed by, of course, the explanation of the source and what does it mean from this source details? It means that the Germans were tightly controlled, they were lacking the sense of freedom, they were losing their sense of belonging. Okay, so now with reference to the three sources that we've used source A, which does not agree with the statement. We also chose source B, which agrees with the statement, correct? And we chose source E, which disagrees with the statement. So three sources, all right, two no and one yes, will actually give you 6 out of 8 marks. Okay, so this is how you are marked. You get 6 marks because you are using 3 sources. So you need one more source actually to get the 7th mark. All right, and if you were to attempt bonus, that's your +1. So any last tips for testing assertion? Definitely, I think time management is very, very important. It is the last question of your source-based question paper. Okay, so sometimes you need that time management and you only have about 15 to 20 minutes. Answer the question. And of course, do not misinterpret sources, because once you misinterpret sources, then definitely the entire source is wrong. Okay? All right, so thank you for watching, and I hope that it has been a bit clearer when you are doing testing assertion. So we'll see you next time. Bye bye.